Run! The word ricocheted off the marble pillars, echoing down endless aisles crammed with ancient, leather-bound volumes. Finch's legs stung as he stumbled through Library Prime, clutching a brass lantern so peculiar it throbbed with a silvery light. Behind him, shadows oozed from inky corners, taking shape. Claws, fangs, leer and snarl. "Not this way, please, not this way," Finch whispered, sneaking a glance at the lantern. The flame inside flickered, casting out curling letters, floating words that melted into reality as they touched the air. A luminous fox burst from the script, leaping across Finch's feet and vanishing into the gloom. He ducked behind a shelf stacked with forbidden tales. Tightening his grip, Finch remembered the first time he'd seen the lantern flare like this. Just before the Chronicles of Drell were devoured by dark mist, and half the staff ran screaming. No one but Finch stayed. Nobody else cared to, after glimpsing the nightmares that crept from unfinished stories. A thud, a hulking shadow moved at the aisle's end. Warlord Grieve, half-legend already, all fury and steel. "The lantern, librarian," he thundered. "I know what it can do. Surrender, and I'll let you live in the new story." "Not a chance," Finch said, voice trembling. He didn't feel brave, only cornered. Book spines jabbed his back. His mind whirled. That lantern twisted imagination into truth. Sometimes beauty, sometimes terror. Worse, every reader's dream or fear fueled it, including his own. If Grieve got hold of it, rewriting history would be easy. Heroes toppled, villains crowned, the future splintered. A storybook swordswoman leapt from the lantern's glow, blade raised. "You shout too much," she sneered at Grieve, her parchment skin shimmering with unreal life. Finch gasped. Could she fight him? Or would she unravel as all unfinished characters did? He inched toward escape, the impossible weight of the library pressing on his shoulders. He'd been a nobody, until the lantern chose him. What now? The words danced in his head. Was there another hero, or only him and his trembling hands? A clash of steel rang out. The swordswoman clashed with Grieve, but he was real, and she faded at his blow. Fear swirled in Finch's gut, his heart pounding like the closing of 1,000 books. He swallowed. Someone had to write a new ending. Someone had to believe, even if it was a scared librarian under flickering storyborn light. With smoke rising from the lantern and his world reeling, Finch ran for the narrow, half-hidden staircase that led into the forbidden stacks. Behind him, Grieve's laughter echoed deep and certain. "Run, little scribe. This story is just beginning." "Watch your step," Finch muttered, ducking beneath a low arch of cracked parchment and splintered wood. The forbidden stacks, older, colder, alive with half-forgotten stories, loomed around him. Each breath made words shimmer in the air, regret, bravery, dread. The lantern's glow bobbed ahead, opening shadows and sometimes turning them into things best left on the page. He paused, catching his breath. 2 shelves away, something slithered, whispering. Finch squeezed the lantern, heart pounding. Not real, he told himself, even as a scaly tale about a snake queen flickered at the edge of his vision. A voice crackled above. "Make friends with the darkness, lad." It was Old Moth, the librarian-turned-mothman who had shunned daylight for rumors and secrets. He fluttered down lightly, fuzzy wings scattering glowing dust. "If you want to keep that lantern, or your skin, you'll need allies. Not many trust a librarian, but stories owe you." "If only they owed me a map out of this nightmare," Finch muttered, inching along the shelves. "You're a scribe, aren't you?" Moth smiled, antennae twitching. "If you want to leave, write it so." Finch's jaw stiffened. "The lantern doesn't work that way. Not for me." "Not yet," Moth said, landing gently on a volume titled Dreams of a Fallen Sky. "But stories grow in telling, even yours." A sudden crash vibrated through the stacks. Pipes overhead rattled, a reminder that Grieve still hunted, and now he was not alone. The warlord's men, rough outlines warped by the lantern's power, fanned out, muttering as they peered between books. Finch's mind raced. He flipped open a nearby book, whispering, "A staircase hidden, made of unwritten words." The lantern shuddered. The air rippled, then resolved into spiraling ink-stained steps, creaking downward. "Impressive," Moth said, eyes glinting. "But every conjured path has its cost." Finch ignored him, clutching the lantern and fleeing down the steps. Words swarmed behind his eyes. Escape, hope, danger. The forbidden stacks whispered warnings. Some true, others bait. "Can you really trust your own creations?" Moth called as they descended. "Or will Grieve twist them into your undoing?" As the stairwell curved, the hush below thickened with magic. Finch drew a shaky breath. Steeling himself, he stepped from the last stair into a twilight chamber, the lantern's glow throwing wild, dancing stories on every wall. Some tales beckoned with outstretched hands, others shrank from the flame. But Finch couldn't turn back. Grieve was close, and somewhere in the gloom, another figure watched, silent and intent, blending into the tapestry of shifting tales. With the fate of the library, and perhaps everything beyond, burning in his hands, Finch squared his shoulders. If stories needed a hero, maybe, just maybe, he could become one, even if it terrified him. "Why is it so cold down here?" Finch whispered. His breath shimmered in the lantern's light, twining above forgotten manuscripts piled like brittle bones in the twilight chamber. Shadows flickered with the pulse of words long silenced, their endings lost to time or fear. Moth's wings quivered as he landed on Finch's shoulder. These are stories that almost never began. They hunger for endings, and for someone to listen. A rustle from the far wall. Finch spun. Out of the dim strode a boy in strange, iridescent armor, eyes gleaming like candlelight. A shiver chased Finch's spine. This was Lyric, the unfinished squire from the Ballad of the Broken King, a story Finch abandoned years ago for being too sad. Lyric looked between them, wary. "I know you," he said quietly. "You left me behind. Why should I trust you now?" Finch tucked the lantern closer, guilt mixing with dread. I'm sorry, Lyric. I didn't mean to. Things just got overwhelming." "If you want help," Lyric said with a sadness far deeper than his age, "you must face what you left unfinished. Otherwise, your enemy will use it first." Finch hesitated. Was Lyric right? He glanced at Moth, who only blinked slowly. All their fates were tangled in words unwritten. Suddenly the whole room shook, Grieve's armored fist thundering on the sealed door above, voice muffled but terrible. "You can't hide! Bring me the lantern, or I'll turn every dream here into a nightmare." A hush fell, then a faint echoing whimper. A story lurking in the shelves began to stir, a fabled terror, unfinished and raw. The walls sweated ink, the lamp guttered, flickered. Finch's panic warred with grim resolve. Moth pressed close. "You can't outrun fear forever, Finch. Let the lantern draw from your courage instead." Trembling, Finch spoke into the silence. "I am still afraid, but I will stand with my stories." The lantern flared. Lyric's armor brightened and something like hope flickered in his eyes. "Then I'll stand with you," Lyric said. He held out his hand. Sparks of unity between creator and creation crackled in the air. Black ink on the floor began to ripple, coalescing into the shape of an archway. An exit, yes, but also a test. "Let's move, and whatever waits ahead we'll face it together," Finch said, his voice steadier. Above, Grieve's men hammered closer. Behind and before, unwritten fears slithered. But with Lyric and Moth beside him, and the lantern burning strong, Finch stepped through the arch, knowing there would be no turning back. He was no longer just a scribe running from shadows. He was a storyteller fighting for the soul of his world. "Careful," Lyric whispered, his steps light on the inky black stones of the passage. The archway behind them faded into mist, trapping heat and safety on the other side. The tunnel ahead was a living hush, thrumming with magic drawn from the lantern, and the shared pulse of their fear. Finch tightened his grip on the lantern as Moth fluttered nervously above. The walls shimmered, shifting scenes and settings blinking in and out of existence. A forest of glass trees, a sea sloshing with fire, the ruins of forgotten cities. Each threatened to snag Finch's imagination, to pull loose another dangerous tale. "Can you hear that?" Moth murmured, antennae quivering. "Voices, just ahead?" Then, this way, whispers born of hope and terror, of heroes that never were but longed to be. Finch's heart banged in his ribs. "We have to move quickly," he said. "If Grieve finds us in these changing halls, the lantern won't just power his plans, it will amplify them." Suddenly, the corridor widened into a vault lined with mirrors, their surfaces rippling with half-told adventures. Finch saw himself in 100 fragments, each version holding a lantern, each haunted by doubt. "Ignore the reflections," Lyric coached. "They'll try to trick you, pull you into their unfinished stories." As if summoned, one reflection grew solid, stepping out of the mirror. It was Finch, but bolder, sharper, draped in dark robes. He smiled with cruel confidence. "Give me the lantern," said the mirrored Finch, voice poisoned with pride. "Let me do what you never could. Rewrite everything, finish every fight." Finch stammered, but Lyric drew his sword, blazing with the hope of an ending. "You're not real," Lyric challenged. "You're just doubt, dressed up to look powerful." Moth landed on Finch's head, whispering, "Speak your truth. The real author is the one who chooses." Finch looked his reflection in the eyes. "I'm scared because I care what happens. That's why the stories matter. I accept my mistakes, and I choose my friends." The shadow Finch snarled, its image fracturing into a flurry of words that scattered across the mirrors. The rest of the reflections faded, and the air grew steadier. Lyric clapped Finch's shoulder. "You did it. You faced yourself." Before Finch could reply, the lantern pulsed, and a secret doorway slid open, just as Greaves' angry shouts echoed from behind, closer than before. "We're not safe yet," Moth warned, already zipping ahead. "But you're learning fast, Scribe." The trio stepped into the next chamber, faces set with new determination. Finch, no longer simply a keeper of stories but their champion, felt a flicker of hope growing into something brighter. The adventure was changing him, page by page, and the fate of both library and reality now turned on how bravely he faced the next unwritten chapter. "How many rooms does this place have?" Lyric breathed as they pushed into a cavernous hall, domed and vast. Bookshelves spiraled upward into darkness. The air buzzed, thick with tension and magic waiting to be shaped. Finch held the lantern aloft. Its silver flame bent and danced, picking out a path between great pillars carved with the names of stories never finished. Titles flickered on the stone: The King Who Forgot, Whisper Stalkers, The Girl Who Could Unmake. Every step, Finch's nerves stretched tighter. Above, voices rumbled. Greaves' men had found another entrance. "Spread out," a gruff voice snapped. "They mustn't reach the heart." Moth landed on Finch's shoulder, wings trembling. "The heart is where the lantern draws deepest. If Grieve gets there, he'll have power to rewrite the world itself." A tremor shook the floor, sending dust spiraling. Lyric stepped protectively in front of Finch. "We stick together. That's how we win." Suddenly, a door on the far side burst open. A storybook thief tumbled through, knives flashing, then blinked in surprise. "Wait, you're not with Grieve." Finch recognized her from the Midnight Pact. "You're Marla." She grinned, wild and sharp. "That's right, Scribe. Looks like your story's gotten complicated. Will you help us?" Finch asked, voice desperate. "We're trying to get to the heart before Grieve." Marla hesitated, then nodded. "If you promise to finish my tale too." "I promise," Finch said, even as the words felt heavy. Another story, another ally, or another burden? Still, he couldn't turn away. Not now. Together, the four crept through the maze of pillars, dodging the swirling spectral arms of unfinished stories. The lantern brightened with every step, sensing trust building between author and characters. They reached a spiral staircase of purest glass. Below rushed a river of silvery ink, roaring with the noise of 1,000 unwritten dreams. The only way down was to cross a narrow bridge, swaying and insubstantial, built on the words of promises kept and broken. Marla laughed quietly. "Only the bold or the honest can cross." Finch glanced at Lyric, Moth, then down at the lantern, forcing his voice steady. "We've made mistakes, we carry regrets, but we cross together." The bridge shimmered, solidifying beneath their feet as belief and bravery melded. Step by step they crossed above the churning ink, shadows of Greaves' men howling behind them, unable to follow. On the far side, at the mouth of a passage throbbing with light, Finch felt something click inside. For the first time, he didn't feel alone, but he knew the worst still waited ahead. "One more level," Moth whispered. "At the heart, stories are born or broken, and Grieve won't wait for us to write our own ending." "It feels like thunder," Marla whispered as they pressed deeper into the narrowing corridor. Static snapped through the air, and the walls gleamed with shifting runes, some crackling with life, others weeping black ink from wounds that would never quite heal. Finch led the way, lantern high, its glow a lifeline in the midst of the oppressive dark. The hall seemed to bend in response, reshaping to the pulse of his heart and the doubts in his mind. Footsteps echoed. Lyric behind him, Marla beside, Moth overhead, watching every shadow. Moth's voice was hushed and urgent. "This close to the heart, stories leak through. Be careful what you think, Scribe." From the gloom, a chilling giggle. Children appeared, transparent and flickering, lost story children who'd never had happy endings. "Play with us," they begged, tugging at Finch's sleeve. "Finish our stories, don't forget us." Finch swallowed hard, guilt needling him, but Lyric stepped between them. He will, Lyric vowed, but not if he's lost to sorrow or fear. The children faded, but their longing left Finch prickling. They turned a bend and froze. Ahead, a massive gate, gears and mechanisms spinning around luminous locks. Each lock shimmered with a different emotion: hope, regret, courage, and fear. Emblazoned at the top, "The heart." "How do we get through?" Marla asked. Lyric pressed a hand to one lock. It burned blue for his courage, then pulsed open. Marla, after a moment's hesitation, lay a palm on regret. It glowed gold, then clicked loose. Moth fluttered to hope, dust glowing in swirls. The lock dissolved into light. Finch stared at the last lock. Fear. It pulsed darkly, drawing out every worry, every moment he'd wanted to run. His throat tightened. "You must face it, Scribe," Moth murmured. Finch took a shaky breath and touched the lock. Images surged, failing his friends, letting Grieve win, becoming lost in unfinished stories forever. His knees wobbled. "I am afraid," he whispered, "but I won't let fear write my story." The lock brightened, dissolved, and the gate swung wide. Warm light surged out, carrying the pulse of every story ever begun. Inside, the heart awaited, a towering pillar of swirling ink and golden fire, the source of all magic in the library. Finch felt its beat in his bones. But the chamber was not empty. Standing with arms crossed, Grieve waited, ringed by hulking story guardians shaped by violence and hunger. His cold smile was a threat kept alive by promise. "Well, Scribe," Grieve boomed, "you brought the lantern and your little friends. But here, only the strongest story survives. Ready to end history as you know it?" Finch's pulse hammered, not with panic but a new, rising resolve. For the first time, he didn't flinch from the churning unknown. "It's not just my story anymore," Finch said softly. "It never was." "It never was," Finch repeated, lifting his chin. Around him, the swirling heart of stories pulsed brighter. Each friend at his side, Lyric, Marla, Moth, stood ready. Finch sensed the weight of their tales and all the unfinished dreams flickering in the chamber's light. Grieve took a step forward, his story guardians bristling behind him. "Empty words, librarian. Power belongs to the one willing to seize it." "You don't understand," Finch replied, his voice growing steadier. "Stories only have power because people hope. They don't belong to any one person." With a sneer, Grieve stabbed his gauntleted fist toward the lantern. Shadows writhed, latching onto it, yanking Finch's arm. The lantern flickered as Grieve's will pressed in, twisting the room. The guardians loomed, shifting shape. Wolves, giants, monsters stitched from 1,000 broken tales. Lyric lunged with his sword, hope blazing in every swing. "You don't control us, Grieve!" Marla darted through the chaos, her knives flashing, slicing away phantom chains that snaked toward Finch. Moth spiraled overhead, scattering words of encouragement like golden dust. "The story isn't over. It's never over." But Grieve's grip tightened. "Everything here exists to be conquered," he thundered, straining the balance of the heart. The pillar's light grew unstable, howling winds full of desperate voices. A moment's hesitation. Finch's arm trembled, the lantern nearly slipping. But he remembered the children, the faces in the mirrors, Lyric's faith, Marla's promise, Moth's wisdom. Fragile, unfinished, scared, but real. With a cry, Finch found his voice. Stories are collaboration. They grow with every voice. The lantern pulsed, its flame shining out brighter than before. Around Finch, the shapes of 1,000 unwritten heroes shimmered, brave, silly, lost, brilliant. The very air began to fill with the sound of pages turning, not in fear, but in defiance. Grieve staggered, his monsters wavering, his shadowy hold loosening. "No," he hissed, forcing more darkness through the heart, shoving at reality itself. Some stories crumbled, but others blazed, overlapping, rewriting their endings even as Grieve tried to erase them. Finch stepped forward, the lantern blazing with collective light. "This ends here, not by conquest, but by people standing together." Behind him, the heart swelled with power, teetering between creation and destruction. The final battle for the fate of every story had begun, and Finch, the quiet scribe, was at its center. The room rippled with chaos, shadows and light wrestling for every inch. Grieve's laughter echoed dark and guttural as he poured his will through fingers curled like claws. The lantern's glow wavered, sputtering as Grieve tried to drag its light into the consuming ink of his own story. "I am the author now!" Grieve roared, struggling to dominate the heart. Pages flew loose from the surrounding shelves, swirling up in a storm of unfinished stories. Nightmare beasts manifested, their forms flickering, unstable but savage. "Worlds will bow to my edits," Grieve bellowed. Lyric fought valiantly, parrying monstrous talons. His armor glowed with hope, each clash striking sparks that held the darkness back. Marla darted at impossible angles, slicing bindings, swiping stories from the jaws of destruction. Moth buzzed circles above Grieve's head, scattering stinging truths. You can't erase what was lived. But for every hero's act, the storm thickened. The heart's golden fire began to flicker, nearly drowned in the ink of fear growing in Finch's chest. Finch faltered, overwhelmed, the shadows in his own mind whispering, "You're not enough. You're only a forgotten librarian. No one wrote you as a hero." Lyric slid to his side, breath ragged, eyes intense. "You're the reason we exist. Don't let him end you. Or us." Marla knelt, pressing a cut palm to the swirling ground. "You gave us beginnings. Now finish what you started." Moth, wings battered, perched on Finch's shoulder. "It's not about never being afraid, Finch. It's about choosing anyway." Their words wove through Finch, trust, responsibility, and a courage born of connection. He met Grieve's gaze. "You think power is about control, but real power is letting go, letting stories change you." He closed his eyes and focused on everyone who had ever read, written, or believed. The lantern pulsed as he poured into it his fear, hope, regret, and above all, his willingness to let others take up the tale. The heart surged in response, light spilling out, pushing back Grieve's darkness. The nightmare beasts howled, their edges unraveling as the unfinished heroes, drawn by Finch's belief, joined battle. A girl riding a wind wolf, a blind knight, a laughing child with hands of light. Grieve screamed, fighting to smother the tide, but his power began to waver as the collaborative force of stories overwhelmed him. Still, the battle was not won. The heart quaked, torn between collapse and creation, the lantern shuddering dangerously in Finch's hands. Finch knew, to save them all, one final leap was needed, a choice so bold it could remake or shatter everything. And as the dust and light swirled, the fate of reality itself hung in the balance, teetering on the edge of a story only half told. The air trembled, each heartbeat a hammer blow in Finch's chest. Cracks laced the heart, leaking blinding light and rivers of ink. Grieve, clothes torn and eyes wild, lunged at Finch. Their hands closed together over the lantern, a desperate tug of war, power trembling at their very fingertips. "Let go," Grieve snarled, his voice a hurricane. "The world is mine to rewrite." "It never was," Finch shot back, locking eyes with the warlord. Despite sweat and terror, Finch's grip was iron. Stories belonged to everyone. A shockwave raced through the chamber. Around them, unfinished tales and spectral heroes rallied, surging forward, Lyric swinging his sword with new ferocity, Marla tossing glowing knives that shattered shadow beasts, Moth weaving hope among despair with tireless battered wings. Each blow struck by a character, each word whispered from a reading heart somewhere beyond the library's walls, weakened Grieve. But Grieve, relentless, poured his nightmare into Finch, the weight of every fear, every failure, every untidy, unfinished line of life. The ceiling trembled, the heart shrieking with strain. The whole world, it seemed, might break. And in the center of that storm, Finch made his choice. He released his fear, not by denying it, but by accepting it, embracing every flaw, every old regret, every unfinished dream. "You can take the lantern," Finch said almost calm, "but you'll never take my story." He let go, not of hope, but of control, of needing to be the perfect writer, the perfect hero. He opened the lantern's flame to the room, to every character and reader, to the whole trembling library, and all who ever believed in story. The lantern burst, not in a destructive flash, but in a tide of living brilliance. Stories streamed out, unfinished and finished, humble and grand, beautiful and broken, all mingling together. The heart drank them in, growing steady as it embraced the wild, unruly chorus. Grieve staggered back, roaring, his form unraveling as the stories rewrote him with every breath, transforming him from conqueror to just another tale. Around Finch, Lyric, Marla, and Moth watched in awe. The walls shimmered as possibility flooded the space. Yet Finch felt a new peril. As the heart rebuilt itself, it asked for one final act of authorship, one last leap of faith to guide everything that would come next. Broken, exhausted, but burning with something new, Finch turned to his friends. "We started this together," he said, voice stronger now. "Let's write the ending as one." Shoulders squared, lantern in hand, Finch took his first step into the searing light of the heart, toward the moment that would reshape all stories forever. Finch stepped into the searing light, his friends Lyric, Marla, Moth beside him. The heart's pulse slowed, growing less frantic, shimmering between worlds. The lantern, now weightless in his palm, blazed with stories not yet told, a symphony of beginnings and endings, 1,000 voices tangled in possibility. For a moment all stood silent. Grieve's shadow slithered away, not destroyed, but dissolved into the fabric of story, no longer able to claim more than his own place in the tapestry. Past and present, fiction and truth blurred. Shelves rebuilt themselves, words spanning the void like bridges. Ghostly children cheered, leaping into warm, completed tales. Heroes and monsters shook free of the ink, waving before evaporating with grateful smiles. The heart addressed them all, a voice as old as language itself. A world of stories is never finished. What will you choose for its next chapter? Finch looked at his friends, brave Lyric, sly Marla, steadfast Moth. We write it together. He knelt, opening the lantern, its light stitched golden threads from their hands and hopes, weaving new tales from their unity. Each friend spoke, Lyric naming courage, Marla promising cleverness, Moth whispering faith. Finch, for his part, offered honesty, his flaws, his dreams, his willingness to grow. The heart swelled, embracing their gifts. Across the library, battered tomes mended, blank pages fluttered into being. New stories flickered into existence, the walls filling with laughter and light. Beyond the library, a ripple pulsed through reality. People everywhere felt an urge to read, write, imagine, to hope and connect. But not all was easy. Finch saw in the lantern's glow that darkness waited at the edges of every story, risk, regret, the unknown. Yet he understood now. It was part of what made stories matter. He closed the lantern, tucking it into his library satchel. Moth winked. Ready for tomorrow, Scribe? Lyric grinned, sheathing his sword. Ready for 100 tomorrows. Even Marla chuckled. Just don't forget my happy ending. Finch, changed forever, but finally sure of his place, led them up from the heart. Each step rewrote the future, a future built not by one author, but by many hearts and hands. The library, no, the world, had been remade. Not perfect, never final, but alive with hope and possibility. And as Finch turned, lantern bright at his hip, he knew, so long as someone dared to dream and tell, every ending would only be a new beginning. The adventure of story would go on forever.